Hey guys, Raymond here from the Beginner Photography Podcast. Today, we're talking about where you should be investing and where you could be saving money when it comes to buying new photography gear. Let's get into it.
Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast with Raymond Hatfield, the podcast dedicated to interviewing world-class photographers to ask them the questions you want answered. Whether you want to be the world's best wedding photographer, family photographer, pet photographer, or you just want to take better photos of your kids growing up, we will get you to start taking better photos today. Here with you as always, husband, father, home brewer, LA Dodgers fan, and award-winning Indianapolis wedding photographer, Raymond Hatfield.
Hey guys, welcome back. Thank you again for joining me in this episode of the Beginner Photography Podcast. As always, I am Raymond, your host, and as you might be able to tell, I'm a little bit sick. So I might sound a bit nasally and a bit stuffy, but that's what happens when you have two children, 5 and one who just started preschool, who's bringing home all these new and wonderful germs, man. He's loving it. He's bringing home all sorts of stuff that my body has never seen before. So it has wreaked havoc on this entire household, and our 1-year-old is not super happy about it. So yeah, there's that. Thank you for bearing with me this week through my nasally congested ideas, I suppose. So that's really been one thing that has been holding me back this week. Is earlier in the week, I always have big ambitions for the week of what I'm going to do. I have a list of everything that I need to get done and everything that I want to get done. I usually wake up much before the kids do so that I can get a good amount of work done before they wake up, and I'm hanging out with them for the rest of the day. But this week, man, you take NyQuil at night and you're done. You're toast. You wake up in the morning and you are still in a fog. I mean, that stuff is no joke. So I would set my alarm for, 5 o'clock in the morning. Nope. I'd wake up, I'd go turn off my alarm, but reset it for 6 o'clock, hoping that I could get up then. Nope. Snoozed right past it. Wouldn't wake up till 8:30. And by then, guess what? Time for the kids to wake up and start my day. So I think by day 2, I just thought, you know what? I just got to give into this sickness. I'm not I'm not a beast when it comes to this stuff. I'm just going to, deal with it and let it take its course and just hope for the best. However, the entire time, you're laying on the couch, you're still thinking of things that could have been done or what needs to be done. But at the same time, still just trying to enjoy yourself, because obviously the kids are sick. They're not very happy, but you try to hang out and play with them and, try to make them feel better. So it wasn't a terrible week at all, actually. But when it comes to progressing my photography or my work, yeah, it was a terrible week. I got nothing done. I take that back. I guess I didn't get nothing done. This week, in fact, if you're listening to this live, tomorrow, our brand new course comes out, Photography Basics for Beginners, 14 Days to Better Photos. It's a video course that I know each and every one of you are going to love. I've put in a ton of time into putting this thing together, and it's finally ready. Like I said, it's a video course. You're going to get a brand new email every single day with a video topic of something new about photography that maybe you didn't know, or something that you did know, just hopefully kind of explained in a new light to help you learn more and become a better photographer. That's all that it's about. And the best part is 100% free. What have you got to lose? Why wouldn't you sign up for this thing? So go ahead and get it now. Head over to beginnerphotographypodcast.com and you will see a banner up at the top to be able to sign up for the course and get it in your inbox right away. So that is it. Go ahead and download it right now. I'm really excited for you guys. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and get into today's episode. We got another one with Matt Druin. And it's something that stemmed from when I was a beginner and I bought, a bunch of useless stuff. And I don't know why. And yet I see other beginners buying the same things. And I wish that I could tell them, you don't need to be buying this stuff. Because, 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road, you're either going to buy something better or will have never used it and it will be a complete waste. So that's what we talk about today. Let me know if you enjoy it. I hope that you do. Because recently we started a chat in the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group about what is the next thing that you're going to be buying. And I got a lot of responses that I was not expecting, but it was really eye-opening and great. So I want to know what's the next thing that you're going to be buying in your photography. Why don't you let me know by heading over over to the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group. And if you're not a part of it, go to our Facebook page and send me a message. Let me know that you want to join the group, or just shoot me an email at beginnerphotographypodcast@gmail.com. That's it, guys. Let's get into it. Hey ho.
Hello, are you sick?
Dude, so sick. Yes.
Fucking get me sick, dude. I feel like I'm getting sick right now, too. I've been stressed in like the last 2 days because I have a Saturday wedding. Well, I have a shoot on Friday for an editorial assignment, and I have a wedding on Saturday, a wedding on Sunday. And my son went kind of sick, and then I heard you sniffing, and I woke up this morning with like a sore throat and like snotty nose and shit.
That's the worst.
Fuck.
Dude.
And now I think I'm getting something from you.
Yeah, man, that's got to be it. That's got to be it. You're definitely getting it from me. You know, one thing that I always like, I buy lots of, I hate to say like craft beer because it sounds so like pretentious or pompous of me. I love it. And I always keep like the fridge stocked from like lots of different breweries. I always like to try new things. And tonight, my wife surprised me when she went out to go shopping. She brought home a beer that I haven't had in a long time because it was a beer from back home when I lived in California. So it's been a while since I've had this one beer in particular, and today she surprised me with it. So I was like, yes, I'm so excited to drink this. Like,
and you can't taste fucking anything?
I can't taste anything, man. I can't taste anything. It's like the mouthfeel is all there, but yeah, everything else is just...
That's like the worst.
Well, you know... We'll just get right on into this. I had a story that I wanted to tell that I thought would really tie in today's theme perfectly. So when I was in high school, we were talking about drinking and stuff earlier. One of the things that like made me stand out from a lot of people was I was it was me and one other kid in our high school who just rode motorcycles like all the time.
Dang, the cool kids, huh?
Yeah, right. I actually bought my motorcycle from the other kid who had a motorcycle. So when he upgraded, I bought his first bike, essentially. But my mom also rode motorcycles, and she was like, I'd much rather you have a motorcycle than a car, because at the time, like, cell phones were really taking off, texting was really big, and like there were some people who like in the newspaper who had died from like texting and driving, you know what I mean? And that was like it was a very new thing, and my mom was worried about that. So she's like, well, if you're on a motorcycle, then I don't have to worry about that. You're not going to be on your phone on a motorcycle. So she was always pro having a motorcycle over a car. Anyway, that doesn't make a difference. But so the motorcycle that I bought was a 250. And if you know anything about motorcycles, like that's a really small engine. Like your car, a 2-liter, right, which is like the average Civic, like entry-level car, you know what I mean, is about 2,000 cc's. So this motorcycle only has 250 cc's. Like, it's not made for a freeway. It's not a very fast bike at all.
Well, compared to the car, I mean, we're dealing with weight.
No, sure, but I mean, still, like, you can take like a Civic on a freeway and have no problems. But like this motorcycle was made for like the town, and
it's a step up above a moped.
Essentially, yeah. That's it. This thing was not powerful. It was not a big bike, but you know, when you think of motorcycles, you think of going fast. You think of like great handling and all this stuff. And this thing was
like the big 1,000cc Ninjas and
liter bikes. This was nothing like that. This thing was janky, but it was my freedom. It was all that I had, right? And I was super excited to have this bike, and I loved it. I rode it everywhere. I worked out at the beach at the time, so I'd 50-degree mornings, I would ride my bike out to the beach.
Man, you were like the super cool kid. Roll up on the beach and just
I loved it,
riding the motorcycle.
I loved it.
All the lays rolling out.
Oh, yeah. Hey, why don't you hop on my... Oh, wait a second. Never mind.
Just one of you.
So when it was time for me, like when the bike started to break down and I started to outgrow the bike and I got a new motorcycle, I got just kind of like a standard run-of-the-mill. It was carbureted. It was a 750, which seems like a big bike, but compared to other smaller fuel-injected motorcycles, it's not a really big bike. And it was like a touring bike. But when I got on this thing, the first thing that I noticed was like how powerful this thing was. It seemed really powerful. And I know that this seems like it has nothing to do with photography, but hold on, just wait, okay?
No, I got you. I'm right along with you.
Really, really powerful. And I was almost like shocked, okay? And that came from 2 years of riding on a smaller, underpowered motorcycle. But what that taught me, like I upgraded to the bike that most people start on. But what those 2 years of riding that 250 taught me was how to handle myself on a motorcycle. It taught me what I wanted in a future motorcycle. It showed me what I really needed. It showed me that
versus what you wanted, and you knew why.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It didn't make me like if I never had a motorcycle, I would have wanted the cool Ninja 600. Like we're going a million miles an hour, wheelies down the freeway.
Well, that lime green. Yeah, get the lime green.
Yeah, gotta get the lime green. You know exactly what I'm talking about. However, it's like none of those things are practical. Like, and looking back at it, I don't want any of those things. But it was starting off with like this really small bike that was underpowered, but it was fun to me, and I just had to work within my limitations. Taught me to find the right bike for me when it was time to upgrade. And that I really valued. And that I think is a great segue into what we're going to talk about today, which is camera gear, right? Like we've talked about how important and not important camera gear is in the past, but today we're kind of switching it up with like third party, aftermarket, you know, how much stuff should you buy on brand and whatnot. So I know that you and I have talked a little bit about this, but I actually don't know. I know that we've talked about like things like batteries, you know, why not to buy those third parties. But what about lenses? Do you buy third party lenses or do you stick all with manufacturer?
Well, actually, I'll jump back to the batteries because so with all my Nikon gear, I will not buy any third party any batteries. I'll only buy the Nikon batteries. But for my Fuji camera, and when I switched completely over to Fuji, it was mostly all Fuji batteries, with the exception of the Wasabi batteries. I don't know if you heard of those or not.
Yeah.
But those actually had a really good track record for the most part, and I never had any problems with them over the years. So that's what I used for probably like a third of the batteries in general, right? But with the Nikons, I'm really weird about that for some reason. I won't buy any third-party any batteries. Like I'd just rather buy the full thing and know for a fact that, I guess with a lot of the batteries, you know, it's like they may work, but they won't show maybe like how full they really are or how not full they really are. Or I've heard some issues with like swelling and getting stuck in cameras and or blowing up. And
that happened to me once. I mean, not the blowing up, but I did have a battery swell on me and I couldn't get it out of the camera.
Yeah, and that's what I've heard. Yeah, and I've never had that issue with the Wasabi batteries, so I've always used them.
Mine was a Wasabi battery that happened.
Yeah, and that's what I've heard too.
Yeah.
Well, specifically with those, and so I didn't personally. I won't put them in the camera. I'll keep them in the grip, just for that reason.
Yeah.
But
what about lenses and stuff? Do you buy third-party lenses, or do you stick with all Nikon or Fuji?
Well, so like in the past, like I wouldn't buy any third-party anything because a number of years ago, like the third-party everything was just garbage for the most part. But these days, like say the Sigma art lenses, like those things are buttery, dude. And like I use the 35 and the 85 Sigma art lenses, and I don't even own the Nikon versions of any of that.
Yeah.
And I don't see a point. I mean, I think the autofocus might be a smidge faster with the Nikon versions.
Right.
But everything else, like quality and everything else, outweighs those for me, especially price. Like it's like half the price, a third of the price, or something like that. But yeah, the quality wise, I mean, I love the quality, and like I'm sure anybody that does a Google search on Sigma will see that. But when it comes to like zoom lenses, no, I won't buy third party any zoom lenses at all. Right. Prime lenses definitely, but
is it mainly for the reliability, or is it mainly for the
I don't know what it is. I think I just haven't been proven yet for me that the zoom lenses are on the same par as like some of the primes are. I say with the Sigma stuff. I could be totally wrong. I've never tried any of that stuff, but I don't know. I just like I don't even use zoom lenses, but so it doesn't really apply to me. Really.
Right. Yeah, I guess that could be kind of hard to talk to. Yeah, you know, when I first got into photography, the camera that I first bought when I thought I'm gonna make a go at being a wedding photographer was a Canon 40D, and I bought it on eBay. I bought it used, and it came with a it wasn't Sigma. It must have been the Tamron 17 to 50 f2.8 or whatever it was. And in my head, I thought like, oh, great, this like it's gonna be a little wider. It's gonna be a nice like consistent aperture, 2.8. It's faster than the stock lens. It's gonna be wonderful. And when I got it, I was legitimately surprised. I was very happy with the lens. It was very lightweight. It responded, pretty quickly for my needs. But there was a few times where I would find that, I'd go to zoom in and the barrel would have a little bit of play before it would actually zoom in. So it didn't feel
as solid.
It performed better than how it felt in my hands. You know what I mean? And like when I would go to use it, I would just kind of question it in the back of my head. Even though when I would go back and look at the photos, I would think, yeah, like these turned out, optically clear. These are fine photos, not much chromatic aberrations. But every time I would go to use it, I would just think in the back of my head, I wonder if it's going to break down today. You know what I mean? I wonder if it's going to fall apart or something on me today. I wonder if the aperture isn't going to fully work today. And that just kind of stuck with me in the back of my head for a long time, but I didn't really realize it until, I didn't realize that was the problem until I upgraded much further down the road and got a 5D Mark II, and it came with the 24 to 70 f2.8. The Canon version. Yeah. And once I used that lens, I thought the build quality. The build quality, it was there. And even though it was an older lens than the original Tamron that I had, this thing felt like a rock. Like it was solid. Every time there was no play in the zoom at all. There was no lens breathing, and everything was. It just felt better in my hands. Mm-hmm. And at that moment, I realized, oh, well, that makes sense. Canon knows what they're doing. Like, this is professional grade stuff. And sure, it may cost 3 times the price, maybe even 4 times the price as a third-party option. But for me, having that peace of mind when I was able to afford it was totally worth it. But I had no problem when I started out, using that Tamron lens. I had no problem because that's what I could afford, and that's what gave me the best image quality. But that was one thing that I was thought of. I'd see all these other photographers who would be spending, $2,000 on a 50 millimeter lens, and it's $2,000. Why would you do that to yourself? But now that it's I don't want to say that I'm at the point to where I can spend $2,000 on a lens. I could. It's just that I when I look at that price, I see where it comes from. I understand because it is that build quality. It is knowing that.
I would say that.
So I guess this kind of segues into one time I had a 35 millimeter, the Canon 35 millimeter f2 image stabilized lens. Okay, and this is still to this day my favorite lens ever. Period. It's my favorite lens I've ever used in my entire life. I love this lens. And it was one of the reasons why I had a hard time switching from Canon to Fuji. However, everybody kept raving about the Sigma Art 35. You got to get it. It's a full stop faster. It's got that 1.4. It's beautiful. So I had a wedding coming up, and it was an outdoor wedding. And I was like, okay, well, there's going to be plenty of light. I'm going to go ahead and rent the Sigma Art 35 f 1.4, and we're going to see how this thing works. And I got it. And I went out, and after knowing the Canon 35 f2 inside and out, I had brought this thing to probably 20 plus weddings. I knew this lens, and when I used the Sigma Art 35 equivalent, I hate to say it, but I was really underwhelmed. I was not a fan of the lens. Like you had mentioned before, it was slower when it came to autofocus.
I would agree with that.
However, the image quality was good. And it was, but here's the thing. So the Canon 35mm f2 was not their flagship. The Canon L series lens is their 1.4, just like the Sigma. Mm-hmm. But the Canon 35 f2 is the exact same price as the Sigma 35 Art. So for the same price, you can go with Canon. You get the faster autofocus. You get the image stabilization. And here's what really set it apart for me is that I know that Canon is thinking about the future. So even if you can't fully utilize this lens on the 5D Mark II or the 5D Mark III, they know that next year the 5D Mark IV is coming out, right? I know that it's already out, but whatever. We're just using this for...
No, I gotcha.
Yeah. They know that that's coming out, and they're going to try to put in faster autofocus motors or completely different technology into their autofocus motors so that it'll be utilized in the future, so that it'll be faster and it'll last longer. You know what I mean? So there's a little bit of future proofing in there. So I don't know, that was one of the things that really turned me off from third party lenses, and still to this day I have a hard time buying third party lenses. So, but I mean, it sounds like a lot of people love them. I mean, a lot of people still seek after the Sigma versions.
I just think so Sigma and Tamron, I mean, just those two companies in general have come a long way since just a few years ago.
Oh yeah.
When they weren't as good, and dude, they're making some incredible shit for way cheaper than some of the name brand like Nikon or Canon lenses, for example. I mean, it's I totally can afford to go out right now and buy the 35 and 85 versions of Nikons, and it wouldn't even bother me. Mm-hmm. But I choose not to because I really do like the Sigma versions of both those lenses. And they definitely are a little bit slower on the autofocus. There's no disagreement with that by any means.
But for that price difference, you can justify it.
It's not just the price difference. There's a certain look to those lenses that isn't for everybody, but it fits my style of shooting really well. So in my post-production, it fits my style.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what it is, but it really fits with what I do, and it just looks really good to me. But it's not for everybody. Everybody has. I think there's a lot of opinion, art, kind of that goes into it. One lens might look one way, and somebody might like that, and one lens looks a different way. And then when it comes to the technicals, it's I'm not a super technical person. I take that back. So I'm a very technical person, but I'm not a pixel peeper, right? I just don't care how good it looks at on a 1-to-1 pixel way. I really just don't care. I don't care if it's one's 2% sharper than the other one. That does not matter to me. But anyway,
yep.
To me, how it shoots, how it feels, and then overall, just in general, kind of how it looks is the most important to me. Mm-hmm. And build quality wise, I don't nowadays. I mean, I think they're pretty much all on par. For the most part, there's certain lenses that one particular lens might be better than another lens or something like that. But that's all just, I don't know. I think mostly personal preference and stuff. And there's definitely plenty of people out there that are just name brand whores. They just want to look cool with whatever name brand.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of it. Sure, some people just want to say that they have,
I really don't care. I tape over all of my logos.
Yeah.
All my cameras, I tape over all my camera logos. I tape over my lens logos. I don't want anybody to even know. I don't even care.
Yeah, exactly. Well, but I mean, again, I think, for the serious pros out there who do just buy 100% name brand everything, I think that it's for reliability. So,
yeah, for sure.
When it comes to things like flashes, let's say, this is totally different than lenses. Because let's say that the Canon version of a lens is $2,000, and then the Sigma version of the exact same focal length and aperture is $1,000. It's half the price, okay? It makes sense to a lot of people to take that gamble and buy the Sigma version, but for a lot of pros who trust and need that reliability, they're willing to spend that extra money on the Canon version.
And I think it just depends on what you're doing. I mean, if I was working for National Geographic, where I'm in the safari and I can't bring backups of multiple things or something, that's a totally different scenario.
Humidity,
but for what I do,
sand, weather, all those things are going to matter.
And that's one thing I look for is I always want weather sealed stuff because I've literally shot in hurricanes and rain and all those different things. I mean, just at weddings. It's
but flashes,
so that's one thing
flashes are totally different.
And lenses, I would say, hold their value. So if you buy a name brand,
it's true,
Nikon or Canon lens, they hold their value.
Yes,
that's for sure. More so than a third party.
Right. But when it comes to flashes and things, so a Canon flash can be $600. $600
for a flash.
For a flash, yeah, exactly. And yet there are plenty of great third-party options out there who can give the same power output and are very reliable.
With way more features.
With way more features.
For dirt cheap.
For like $70. Like literally, like just more than a tenth of the price. $70. So for something like that, the way that I see it is that I would rather buy 4 of those third-party flashes just to have in my bag, just to know that they put out the same power, they're very consistent, and I can trust them. However, if something goes wrong, I can afford to have a backup, a third, and even a fourth backup if I need it. You know what I mean? And still come in less than half the price of one Canon flash. So that's an area where like I have no problem. Zero problem buying something that's third party.
Dude, you know what's crazy is like, so right now in my bag, I probably have 2 or 3 Canon flashes. I have 2 or 3 young Nuo flashes.
Why do you have Canon flashes? Young Nuo?
Young Nuo, and I have 2 Nikon flashes. And because I know how, and I shoot everything in full manual, I can care less about all the other bullshit like TTL and all that stuff because I don't use any of that.
Creative lighting,
so
whatever.
I can use all these different flashes and it all is the exact same. And I can't tell you. I've probably gone through 3 or 4 flashes in the last year and a half, probably just from people like I'm pretty rough on some stuff, you know. So like I dropped one in a river. Somebody kicked one over at a wedding.
I've had that, yeah.
So if that was a $600 Nikon or Canon lens or flash, dude, I would have been.
That'd be an insurance claim. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, I wouldn't file it for my insurance.
Right.
For some people, maybe. but yeah, that would have been terrible. But no, that thing was $65. I'd care less. You want to kick it over a few more? Go ahead. Yeah, it's cool. Like,
you know, it's funny. I had a flash that I took to a wedding, and it was like it was a barn wedding, but it was 2 stories. So the dance floor was obviously on the bottom, and then the top was like the like where people could hang out and like overlook the dance floor and see everybody and whatnot.
Oh yeah, gotcha.
But that's why I put my flashes. I had a flash stand on the second store, and then I had it pointed down at the dance floor. However, upstairs was totally cramped, so every time I had to get to it, like there was a million people. So they ended up knocking it over, right? Like you said, it was like a $70 flash. It was no big deal. I just replaced it.
Did it fall to the second floor?
No. It fell just down like on a table. So it was no big deal. But I didn't test that flash before I took it to my next wedding, which I totally should have. So the first time I went to go use it was it was a pretty like creative shot. It was outdoors. It was night. And I went to go backlight the couple, and I was like, oh, I'll go ahead and set it to like an 1/8 power, right? Like pretty moderate amount of flash power. And then, so I went to go take the picture, and when I looked at the back, it clearly, the flash had fired at full power. And like what it produced was incredible. It was like so awesome. And I never would have thought to have tried firing it at full power. But now that flash, that's all that it does, is that it only fires in full power. So like I look at this flash as my get out of like a creative funk type flash. I will use it in all sorts of situations and then adapt myself to it to just try to get something new.
Why not? It still works.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, to a degree, it still works. You can't.
Yeah. Well, it works for one very specific job.
Yeah. Exactly.
Full power.
But I mean, if that was, like you said, if that was a $600 flash, man, I would have. I would hold resentment towards it. It wouldn't be like a quirk. It would be like, man, this thing is broken. This thing's a piece of garbage. And then I would have, tried to sell it for probably like $200. Knowing, like, obviously saying that it was broken and that's what it did. But yeah, I think that it's important to ask yourself like when and where you're going to be using the gear. Like if you're thinking of saving money on a lens, ask yourself, is it weather sealed? Are you going to be in a condition where you're going to have high humidity? Are you going to be in, rainfall, anything like that? Like for me, a really good tripod is not that important to me.
No,
I don't use a tripod very much at all. Like I'm totally fine using this like, $100 silk tripod that I've had that thing for geez, 12 years now. Now that I think about it, I've had it for 12 years, and it hasn't failed me. But like, it's not the best tripod in the entire world. You know what I mean?
But I mean, if you were a landscape photographer or something else, I mean, that would be critical, like an astrophotography
Yeah, this thing would be garbage.
person.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
that would be a huge component of what you do. I mean, for what we do, I own a tripod that has a lot of dust on it.
Yeah.
That's about the extent of my tripodness. I mean, a lot of times I'm literally using a light stand as a tripod for like my astrophotography and stuff. Like, dude, I'm using like a $40 like light stand, like, and just making it work.
That's hilarious.
But you know, it's a good point. Like on the lenses, I remember when I first started, like I bought cheaper lenses because I couldn't afford anything else.
Yes.
And it was the worst mistake I made.
Yes.
Like I wish I would have saved up extra money and bought just like the badass like.
Okay, well then let me ask you a question real quick. Did you ever buy like the macro filters or like the extension tubes?
No, I never got into that stuff.
Oh, okay.
No.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, that's another area. It's just like you're trying to kind of half-ass make it work, and it probably does. It probably would be great. I mean, if you were like a hobbyist or something like that, I mean, whatever, it probably is fine. But when you're trying to do professional work and you're kind of trying to half-ass gear, like it's a totally different.
Kinda, but then it goes back to like, what is it that you're shooting? Like, if you're a hobbyist and you shoot flowers, if you shoot newborns, if you shoot, insects, you're not. Like, those macro filters are not going to do it for you. Like, you're going to have to invest in an actual macro lens. But
potentially, yeah. I mean, I know on some of the Fuji stuff when I was using that, I tried one of those and it worked perfectly fine for what I needed.
What's that, the extension tube or a macro filter?
The extension tube. Or you remember that when I bought those lens babies a couple weeks ago?
Oh yeah.
And then returned both of them.
Yeah.
So I tried them out and like they did do pretty awesome for what I wanted them for, but then I was like, but how often am I really going to use this? Is it going to be something I'm actually going to use? I was like, no, I just sent it all back. But one of the benefits of, I can't remember which one it was it had a macro feature and it worked amazingly for $300 versus buying, I don't know, whatever it costs to get a macro. Like, I think for the Fuji ones, it was like that 60, was it a 60 macro?
Yeah.
And literally the only thing I would use that lens for would be a macro, and it costs like $1,000 or something. And I would use that macro maybe once every couple of months.
Yeah.
So in that situation, it totally was not worth it. Like, I'd rather buy that $300 lens baby that worked good enough than spending $1,000 on a lens I'm not going to use that often.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, I think that's what's important here is that you just ask yourself, how valuable is this to me? How much is this going to help me? How much is this going to save my ass? You know what I mean? Things like that.
That's such a weird thing. It's like, so we're talking about this, but there's not necessarily a right or a wrong answer. Sort of, kind of. And it all just, there's never anything definitive we can actually say about any of this.
Like, that's where it's hard.
Annoying.
Like, I could talk about me and you could talk about you, but when we talk about everybody listening, it's we just don't know where they're at. And I know that when I was a beginner, and when I hear other beginners, they'll go on Amazon and they're like, yeah, I bought this lens and it came with like a rocket blower, it came with a lens pen, it came with an SD card, it came with like a card reader, it came with, a tabletop tripod, and you're like, geez, man. It's like, what didn't this thing come with? And it was $5 cheaper than just buying the lens itself. And I was like, okay, well, how good is that gear? You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to be using any of that gear in like 6 months from now.
Many of camera bought in the last couple of weeks. You already know my scenario about that. But I probably bought 4 or 5 different camera bodies in the last couple months, and every one of them came with all that stuff.
Oh, really?
And literally all that stuff went in the garbage with the exception of like 2 things.
Yeah,
Well, to give to a friend. Like, so don't be fooled by whatever stuff they're sending you, because it probably is just terrible.
Yeah. Well, then one thing that we can definitely talk definitively on.
I already know you're going.
Is SD cards, like memory cards.
Memory
cards, not necessarily SD cards. Whatever your camera takes. Definitely memory cards. So, I think, maybe I should write a blog about this. Maybe I should write like a blog about like the best memory cards to buy, because I know that when I first started, I didn't know. Like, I just Googled like best memory cards for photographers, or
cheapest one.
Or cheapest one. Yeah, exactly. But like, that's never the right answer. And yet you can have like a SanDisk or a Lexar, 32 gig, class 10, UHS 1, 90 megabit per second card, and then you'll have like the exact same specs on like
Cactus.
Yeah, or like Team America, or like
I found that today.
Cactus. That's a ridiculous name
Cactus
for a memory
SD
company.
cards.
But like you'll have the exact same specs on these two different cards, but the Cactus one will be like $3, and the Sandisk one will be like $89, and you'll ask like, well, if they're the exact same specs, why wouldn't I go for the $3 one? But man, have you ever had a card that failed on you, Matt?
No.
Have you ever heard of anybody who's had a card fail on them?
Oh, tons. I mean, if you get on social media at all, like, yeah, all of them. Like, there's always somebody on there.
And 9 times out of 10, it comes from these people buying, like, really cheap cards.
Cheap cards. A lot of times. I mean, I've heard, like, stories with, like, Lexar at SanDisk. I mean, it's bound to happen. And this is the same is true when dealing with, like, say, hard drives. Mm-hmm. It's the exact same thing. Because people are always asking, like, well, what hard drive should I buy? Like this, that, and the other. And it's always the same. And to a degree, there's a brand preference to a degree, but it's like Lexar, I mean, they don't even make anything anymore.
Yeah.
So it's they're not even a real competitor. So really, the only thing, there's like SanDisk, there's like Panasonic, Sony, and a few other ones make cards. But it's like, so for me, like, I've used SanDisk cards, SD and compact flash and everything, like, since day one.
Yeah.
And part of that was because of the research I did. I found they were like, it seemed to be the most reliable. I mean, every memory cards, hard drives, all of it is going to fail. They're guaranteed that it's going to fail at some point. It's not like if it's going to fail, it's just when. That's just the nature of what it is, But like SanDisk, for example,
hold on, real quick. That sounds like an argument to buy the $3 card. If both cards are going to fail anyway, why wouldn't you just buy the $3 card?
Well, there's I think a difference in the failure rate. That's kind of
okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
But like SanDisk invented SD cards. They invented compact flash. So it's like they are the creators of this stuff. So that's kind of what I went with. It's like, well, who knows these things better than they do?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the same reasons of why, like, I use Western Digital hard drives. Like, other than the fact that, like, they've been so reliable for me over the years. I mean, there's probably other hard drives out there that are cheaper that people use, and they probably swear by them. I'm saying? Just the way I do with Western Digital or SanDisk.
Right.
But when we're dealing with, like, things like Cactus, like, that legitimately is...
Yeah, these, like fly-by-night companies that nobody's ever heard of.
Or, like, I saw another one, it's called Acer, like ACCER or something. Or anything that comes free with those kits that you buy.
Yeah. Other
than maybe some of the Lexar cards. They're probably dumping those like crazy right now.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
Lexar doesn't make anything anymore, but...
Yeah, well, like, that's one... When I first started, like, that's where I looked to save money. It was like, well, I know that I need more memory cards.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
That's probably the worst place to save money.
You're 100% right. Like, I was lucky enough to never have a card fail on me, but I've had a few times where I've had corrupt files.
I've had that a couple times.
And I've wondered if it was the card's fault or the camera's fault. Like, I could never...
It's hard to say. Or your fault. I mean, it literally could be your fault. Like, one of the things that a lot of people do that's like horrible for that thing is, like, if you delete photos in camera, like, that's terrible. Like, that
as opposed to just formatting the card.
Well, no, I mean, how people, like, they'll take photos and it's like, oh, well, this one sucks. I'm just going to go ahead and delete that one out now. In a camera, like, that's really bad.
Right.
Or if people format their cards on a computer versus formatting in camera, that's really bad.
Yeah,
I mean, there are certain things that could potentially cause problems.
That's true.
So, yeah, it could be all of those things.
Could have been, yeah.
I mean, I was using a SanDisk card, and I had a couple corrupt files, and it could be the import, too. I mean, it could be a cable. It could be anything.
Yeah.
It could be a piece of dust that looked at you the wrong way across the room. Like, it's hard to say, But
this is all about, like, minimizing that risk.
Right? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So what I did was, like, I ejected the card, re-injected it, and it happened to import correctly, and then I drilled a hole through it and threw it away. I didn't even bother taking a risk. And I swap my cards out about every year and a half. So I have them all labeled. They're all, like, dated. They're all numbered, like 1 through whatever.
Yes.
And once they reach the year and a half mark, even if they're working perfectly fine, I ditch all of them and buy new ones.
Yeah, I go through the same like numbering scheme, but
Same with hard drives. Every year, all my hard drives are completely replaced.
you do once a
Every
year.
hmm
Wow, that's wow. So I think that we'll kind of wrap this up. Is that like I know that like everything that we talked about is where you can save money, where you shouldn't try to save money, like where you should really invest in your photography and whatnot. But I think that like if we didn't address something today that you are thinking about saving money, like where you should really ask yourself is like how critical is this, right? So batteries, like batteries are batteries. And they're gonna kind of work. Except I can tell you that one time I was at a wedding, and every time I would go to press the shutter, the camera would turn off. I would turn it back on, and it would work fine. I'd take a picture, and then it would just completely turn off the camera. And I found out later that it was because of a third-party battery. From then on, now I only buy Fuji batteries. That is mission critical because I lost,
or
at
at least
I missed out
for that. Yeah, I would say if you're doing professional work in general, get the good ass gear that you can and rent what you can't and work your way up, right?
Right.
I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with using third-party stuff on some level, depending on what it is.
But don't hold on to it. Like don't
do
by it.
research.
Yes.
Yeah, do your research and have backups in case something does go wrong. But like with lenses, I think buy the best that works for you because that's an investment to a degree because it holds its value really well.
Right.
Camera bodies, who gives a fuck? Like
next year they're gonna be worth nothing.
Yeah, I'm at least a year and a half old on all my camera bodies and always will be. Like when that new Nikon D850 is coming out, am I buying it? Absolutely not. I'm gonna let everybody else buy it, and wear it out and do their thing, and then I'll buy it used. Just because that's how you make money, Like
right.
If you're buying new gear all the time, you're not going to be making money.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Look at any really good professional and do their gears beat the hell. Like I'll see photojournalists and like their doors are all taped closed. Everything just looks so ghetto. But they're making it work.
Yeah. But then again, that's because they're buying gear that's made to last. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
They're not buying the cheapest things that they can buy. So.
Not at all.
Well, Matt, I think this was a legit talk. Is there anything that we didn't talk about today?
I don't think we really talked about anything third party other than like those big components.
No.
Like what about triggers and like all like I don't know, like light diffusers and
yeah. Well, that's something that I think that we could talk about later on. This kind of progressed into something that I wasn't expecting. I know that we wanted to talk exclusively about like third party and stuff, but I think that this turned out to
where to invest your money.
Yeah, how to determine where you should invest your money and why you shouldn't be buying cheap things sometimes. So
well, this is even more of an excuse for everybody to join the Facebook group and let's have a conversation in there.
Hey, that's a really good idea.
About all the stuff we missed.
Yeah, that is a really good idea, guys. If you want to join this wonderful Facebook group that Matt is talking about, which today we talked all about our newest purchases that we're going to be buying, and I found out that a lot of people are looking into some really new and cool stuff that I'm excited to see. But if you want to join, head over to facebook.com/beginner photography podcast and just shoot me a message asking to join the group. It's a closed group, so you can't find it. It's a secret club for only all the cool kids like you. If you're
all
listening
cool
right
kids.
Now. That's right. That's it. This is the only people who are in there. I better kick myself out. I don't have a fidget spinner. Yeah. Or you can just shoot me an email directly at beginnerphotographypodcast@gmail.com, and I will send you the link right away. So, guys, I think that's it for today. If you guys have any questions, head over to beginnerphotographypodcast.com and leave us a comment in the show notes or just shoot us an email. But until next week, I love you guys. Get out there, keep shooting more, and share your photos on Instagram and let us see them. Tag us. And I will see you guys next week.
Well, what's the tag for Instagram?
Well, just like, our username, like mention us. Beginner Photo Podcast.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
There you go. All right, guys. See you next week. That's it, guys. I really hope that you enjoyed this episode and that you learned something. Maybe you decided not to buy something on Amazon that you thought that you really needed, but instead you're going to wait for the real thing. Because I actually just heard a quote yesterday, which was, buy it right or buy it twice. And I think that I really wish that I would have known that before we recorded this episode, but I really think that it holds true and pertains exactly to this episode. So guys, if you enjoyed this episode and appreciate the knowledge that you're gaining from the Beginner Photography Podcast, I cannot tell you how appreciative I would be and how thankful I would be if you became a patron of the podcast on Patreon, which lets you get access to a bunch of great info and future tutorials. You'll also be able to learn about future guests coming up so that you can ask awesome questions that will, pertain to you. And now this is your chance. You can do that. If you know that, if you're a newborn photographer and you know that a newborn photographer is coming on the podcast, you can ask the questions that might pertain to how do you get more clients? How do you deal with a work-life balance, having only such a limited amount of time, or being on call for birth photographers? How to deal with things like that, things that I might not think of right off the bat. So if you're interested in that, head over to patreon.com/beginner photography podcast. That's Patreon, patreon.com/beginner photography podcast. And if you are driving right now, no worries. I have a link on the Beginner Photography Podcast homepage. Just click it. It's right there on the homepage. You can't miss it. And become a patron today, like Bethany, who recently became a patron. Bethany is a mom from Melbourne, Australia. And she has just been taking a lot of photos of her kids. She's also in the Facebook group of the Beginner Photography Podcast, and she's been sharing photos there. And I'm telling you, her photography is really going to mean a lot to her kids when they grow up, because she's taking the time now to invest in knowing how to tell a better story through her camera, so that when her children get older, they'll be able to relive those moments that, a lot of us forget often. So I'm really excited to have Bethany as a patron of the podcast. And Bethany, if you're listening, which I assume that I don't know why you wouldn't be, then go ahead and send your requests my way, as you are a patron. She gave me some history on being a patron, and she let me know that I'm going to have some demands coming my way. So I am open for those, and I cannot wait to hear them. So that's it, guys. I love you. I will see you next week, and happy shooting.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Beginner Photography Podcast. Be sure to join the conversations on Facebook and Instagram. And if you want any links or resources we talked about in today's episode, check out the show notes at beginnerphotographypodcast.com. See you again next week.